My name is Jolie Hart, and for 7 years, I gave Northbridge Systems everything I had. My nights, my weekends, my health, and apparently the perfect blueprint for someone else's promotion. I was the senior operations architect, which was the company's polite way of saying, call Jolie when nobody else knows what's going on. If a shipment vanished, if a report crashed, if a client threatened to walk, if a warehouse dashboard started blinking red like a Christmas tree in a lawsuit, I was the one they found. So, when I walked into my annual review, I thought I was finally getting promoted. Instead, I got a lesson in corporate comedy. If you're wondering how I became not ready, and how the man who fired me ended up losing everything, like this video, where are you listening from, and what time is it there now? Let me show you what he did next. Victor Langley, our new operations director, sat across from me with a confident little smile of a man who had spent 6 months learning the company and somehow understood none of it. His greatest achievement so far was turning simple meetings into 2-hour alignment conversations. He looked at me and said, Jolie, you're extremely valuable. My stomach tightened. People only say that right before they explain why your value will not be rewarded. Then Victor leaned back and said, but I don't think you're ready for leadership. For a second, I could not breathe. Before I could answer, he clicked to the next slide and announced that Kelsey Monroe would be promoted instead. Kelsey had been with us for 11 months. She once asked me if logistics compliance was handled by legal or by the warehouse people. Victor smiled and added, you'll support her transition for 90 days. Think of it as a chance to prove your teamwork. I had my resignation letter in my purse. I touched the envelope, ready to hand it over. Then I stopped. No. Quitting would let them blame my absence. So, I folded the letter, put it away, and smiled. Of course, I said, from now on, I'll do exactly what my current role requires. Victor looked relieved. He had no idea that one sentence would cost him his job. I want to make one thing clear. This is a fictional story with some details enhanced by AI to make it more emotional, dramatic, and meaningful. So listen closely, feel the story, and reflect on the lesson behind it. Now let's continue. 7 years earlier, Northbridge Systems was not a company. It was a group project. Orders were tracked in spreadsheets named Final, Final 2, and actually Finals this one. Warehouse managers called each other at midnight to confirm inventory, and clients learned about delays only after their customers complained first. That was when I built Pulse Grid. I designed it because no one else wanted to touch the mess. Pulse Grid connected warehouse data, shipment schedules, client forecasts, and exceptional alerts into one live system. Within 18 months, delivery errors dropped from 14% to under 2%. Late reports went from 72 hours behind to 15 minutes behind. Revenue did not magically climb to $146 million because Victor Langley discovered the phrase, operational excellence. It climbed because the machine finally worked. But Victor never saw the machine. He saw meetings, he saw titles, he saw Kelsey Monroe smiling at the right moments and nodding whenever he said leadership pipeline. To him, that was potential. To me, it was terrifying. He loved saying, Jolie is our technical backbone, as if a backbone was something you kept hidden under a blazer and ignored until it snapped. The week after Kelsey's promotion, Victor made the insult official. Everlane Retail Group, our largest client, scheduled a renewal meeting worth $31 million a year. I had managed their account for 5 years. I knew their seasonal spikes, their regional pain points, even which distribution center always failed during storms. Yet Victor handed the presentation to Kelsey. You'll sit in, he told me, in case she needs support. Support? Apparently, that was the new word for building the entire foundation and then being asked to hold the flashlight. During the meeting, Kelsey mispronounced Everlane's vice president's name, reversed 2 inventory figures, and called a compliance hold, probably just a warehouse mood thing. Victor laughed too loudly. I stared at my notebook until my pen nearly cracked. Then he turned to me and said, "Jolie, why don't you clean that up for her?" That afternoon I went home with my resignation letter, still folded inside my purse. For years, I had imagined quitting would feel dramatic, like slamming a door. Instead, I sat at my kitchen table, read my job description carefully, and started laughing. Not because it was funny, because it was so small. According to Northbridge, I was responsible for system architecture documentation, workflow analysis, and operational reporting support. Nothing about rescuing executive presentations at midnight. Nothing about training an unqualified director. Nothing about being the emergency brake for every bad decision Victor Langley made before lunch. So the next morning I emailed HR. After further consideration, I will remain in my current position and perform the responsibilities assigned to my current role. Clean, professional, ice cold. Victor replied within 6 minutes. "Glad you've come around." I stared at those words and smiled. No, Victor, I had not come around. I had stepped aside. At 5 p.m. I shut my laptop. When Kelsey messaged at 6:43, asking why the Midwest forecast dashboard looked weird, I answered at 8:02 the next morning. Forecast ownership now sits with Operation Strategy. Please contact Victor for direction. At 11:15, Victor asked me to review his Everlane recovery deck. I sent back one sentence. Client-facing strategy materials are outside my current role. By Wednesday, the invisible work started becoming visible. The Dallas warehouse uploaded duplicate inventory counts. No one corrected them. The automated exception report flagged 74 delayed shipments. No one prioritized them. Finance asked why the weekly margin file no longer matched the fulfillment data. No one knew I had been reconciling those numbers manually for 3 years. Kelsey stopped using exclamation points in her messages. Victor stopped smiling in meetings. By Friday morning, Pulse Grid had not collapsed. That would have been simple. It was doing something worse. It was telling the truth without me polishing, filtering, translating, or quietly saving everyone from it. And for the first time in 7 years, I let it. By Monday, Kelsey Monroe had discovered the difference between being promoted and being prepared. She started her first week by sending an email. All operational decisions will now flow through me for better alignment. It was adorable, like a toddler holding car keys. Her first aligned decision was forwarding an unverified performance report to Everlane Retail Group. Unfortunately, the report labeled their holiday inventory risk as client-created chaos and listed their vice president, Marcia Bell, as Martha Belt. Everlane did not find that charming. Victor called it a minor communication issue. Finance called it a possible renewal problem. I called it Monday. By noon, Kelsey approved a warehouse reroute. 6,000 units meant for Ohio went to Nevada. By 3, she marked 28 exception alerts as resolved because, as she later explained, she thought resolved meant acknowledged. Pulse Grid, bless its honest heart, kept recording everything. Then came Victor's message, "Need you in my office now." I walked in with my notebook, not my panic. He pointed at his screen, "Fix this." I looked at the report, then at him. Everlane Strategy belongs to the Director of Operations Strategy. Kelsey is still learning. Then she should learn. His jaw tightened. "Jolie, don't be difficult." That word always amazed me. Difficult meant I would not quietly absorb the consequences of someone else's incompetence. Difficult meant I remembered my job description. Difficult meant I had stopped volunteering as the company's unpaid disaster insurance. So I said, "I'm happy to provide system documentation within my current role." Victor leaned back like I had spoken another language. Before he could lecture me about teamwork, his phone rang. He put it on speaker by mistake. Marcia Bell's voice filled the room. "Victor, we need to meet with Jolie Hart directly. Not Kelsey, not a transition team, Jolie." For the first time all week, I almost smiled. Victor stared at me and I stared back calmly. Finally, the room understood what my silence had been costing them. Victor did not take Everlane's request well. Men like him rarely fear failure. They fear witnesses. By Tuesday morning, he had found his favorite management tool, blaming the woman who had warned him. He sent an email to HR, copied the CFO, and wrote, "Jolie Hart has refused to support the transition process, creating unnecessary operational risk." Unnecessary. That word almost made me laugh. I replied 10 minutes later with 14 attachments, my job description, 7 years of performance reviews, the promotion announcement, Victor's transition memo, and a spreadsheet titled Unassigned Responsibilities, performed by Jolie Hart. It had 83 rows, client recovery calls, margin reconciliation, warehouse escalation triage, executive dashboard validation, midnight incident response, training materials for people who outranked me and still could not define the system they managed. At the bottom, I wrote, "Please identify which of these duties are formally assigned to my current position." HR went silent. Victor did not. At 2:17, my advanced pulse grid permissions disappeared. No warning and no meeting. Just a system notification telling me my access had been revised. Victor thought he had cornered me. He had actually removed the only person filtering the fire alarm before the building heard it. Within an hour, every critical alert began routing to Kelsey. By 5, she had received 412 notifications. By noon the next day, it was 1,247. She marked most of them resolved because the button was green, and apparently, green felt encouraging. The results arrived quickly. Dallas duplicated inventory counts. Phoenix missed a carrier cutoff. 3 Midwest warehouses shipped from the wrong reserve stock. Emergency freight alone cost $480,000 in one day. Victor called me into a conference room and slammed the door. "You're enjoying this," he said. I folded my hands. "No, I'm documenting it." And unlike Victor's speeches, documentation had a nasty habit of surviving meetings, audits, and excuses, especially his. His face changed then, not anger anymore, fear. Because suddenly, everyone could see the work I had stopped hiding. If you think me stepping back and letting Victor face the consequences was too harsh, comment too far. But if you trust me, if you believe I was right, to stop caring people who never respected me, comment I stand with Jolie so I know I'm not alone. The Everlane meeting was scheduled for Thursday at 9 a.m., which gave Victor exactly 36 hours to pretend he was not terrified. He arrived with Kelsey, 2 directors, and a recovery deck so polished it practically begged people not to read the numbers. I sat at the far end of the table because officially I was only there for technical context. Corporate language is amazing. It can turn the person who built the system into a decorative emergency exit. Victor opened with his usual smile. "We've had a few transition-related bumps, but our leadership team has everything under control." Marcia Bell, Everlane's vice president, did not smile back. "We would like to hear from Jolie." Victor blinked. "Jolie can support any technical questions after Kelsey explains our new strategy." Marcia closed her folder. "No, we asked for Jolie." The room went quiet enough to hear Kelsey swallowing, so I stood, connected my laptop, and showed them the truth. On-time delivery had dropped from 97.4% to 81.2% in 11 days. Return-related complaints had tripled. Emergency freight costs were up $480,000. 3 regional stock forecasts had been approved without validation after my access was removed. Victor interrupted. "Those numbers lack context." I clicked to the next slide. Here is the context. Up came his emails cutting validation checks, moving approval authority to Kelsey, calling audit alerts noise, and asking me to stay out of strategic decisions. Nothing dramatic, just his own words, which was apparently the cruelest thing I could have presented. Kelsey stared at the table. CFO stared at Victor. Marcia stared at me. Finally, Marcia said, "Everlane is prepared to renew for 3 years, but only under one condition." Victor leaned forward too quickly. "Of course. Kelsey will personally oversee," Marcia said. Jolie Hart will be our direct strategic lead, with authority to override operational decisions affecting our account. Victor's face went pale. For the first time in weeks, I did not feel invisible. I felt expensive, and Victor finally understood the price of ignoring me. After Everlane left the room, Victor asked me to stay behind. He did not say please. Men like him treat politeness as a budget item they cut during emergencies. He closed the door and lowered his voice. Jolie, we destabilize this. I'm prepared to make you acting director for 60 days. Acting temporary, same salary, twice the responsibility. It was impressive, really. Even while drowning, Victor was still trying to sell me a leaky boat. I looked at him and said no. His mouth actually opened before any words came out. Excuse me. No, I repeated. I will not accept a temporary title to repair permanent damage. He leaned forward. You understand the pressure this company is under? I do. I've been absorbing it for 7 years. By 3:00, I sent my proposal to the CEO, CFO, HR, and Victor. It was not emotional, it was not dramatic, it was 5 pages cleanly formatted, because rage is more effective when it has bullet points. I requested the title Director of Operational Systems, compensation aligned with market rate, direct authority over high-risk process changes, written ownership recognition for pulse grid architecture, and the right to halt client-impacting decisions that skipped validation. Victor laughed when the CEO read it aloud in the conference room. She's overestimating her value. The CFO, Martin Hayes, adjusted his glasses. Actually, she may be underestimating it. He pulled up a report. Pulse Grid had saved Northbridge $8.7 million over 3 years through reduced freight waste, lower error rates, and faster inventory reconciliation. Everlane's renewal represented another $96 million over the next term, and their condition was very specific. Jolie Hart, not Victor's leadership pipeline. Victor shifted in his chair. Those savings were a team effort. Martin nodded. Then why does every critical workflow trace back to her documentation? No one answered. I sat there quietly, hands folded, feeling something inside me unlock. I had not raised my voice. I had not begged. I had simply named my price for once. The room listened very carefully now. Victor did not lose gracefully. People who mistake authority for competence rarely do. By Friday morning, he had prepared what he called a leadership risk summary, which was corporate poetry for blame Jolie before the board reads the numbers. He accused me of hoarding knowledge, manipulating Everlane, and using operational disruption to pressure Northbridge into promoting me. He even wrote that I had created dependency around Pulse Grid. That was cute. I created dependency the same way brakes create dependency in a car. The emergency board meeting began at 2. Victor wore his serious face, the one he used when pretending he had discovered consequences only recently. He projected his report and said, Jolie's behavior has exposed a major cultural issue. I waited until he finished. Then I opened my laptop. May I show the audit log? The CEO nodded. Pulse Grid kept every approval, override, alert dismissal, permission change, and routing decision. I had designed that feature after a warehouse manager once tried to blame a printer for losing $40,000 of inventory. Machines lie less than executives. The first log showed Victor removing my validation access. The second showed Kelsey receiving 1,247 alerts. The third showed her marking them resolved without corrective action. The fourth showed Victor approving the removal of secondary checks on Everlane forecasts. Each entry had timestamps, names, and digital signatures. Victor leaned forward. Those logs are being taken out of context. So I showed the context: his emails calling audit alerts noise, his memo naming Kelsey final approver, and his weekly report to the board stating there had been no material client risk during the exact week emergency freight cost $480,000. The CFO's face hardened. Victor, why was this omitted? Victor looked around for rescue and found only witnesses. I closed my laptop. For the first time, he was not fighting me. He was fighting the record he had created himself. That was when the room finally turned against him, and the record was winning. By Monday morning, the investigation had stopped being quiet. HR called it a review. Finance called it an exposure analysis. I called it what it was, the bill for Victor Langley's confidence. The numbers were ugly enough to need their own conference room. 18 days of fresh leadership had cost Northbridge $2, $3 million in emergency freight, chargebacks, correction labor, and client penalties. 4 major accounts had requested performance audits. Everlane, our $31 million a year client, had paused renewal language until my authority was confirmed in writing. Victor sat across from the committee, suddenly fascinated by his hands. Then Kelsey walked in. She looked smaller than she had during her promotion announcement. No bright blazer, no leadership smile, just a folder clutched against her chest and the expression of someone who had finally learned that titles do not come with instructions. She told the truth. Victor said, I should approve the changes, she admitted. He said Jolie had always fixed things in the background, so if anything went wrong, she would clean it up before clients noticed. The room went still. I did not look at Victor. I did not need to. I could feel his panic moving through the air like bad cologne. He tried one last time. Kelsey misunderstood. I encouraged her development. The CFO slid a printed email across the table. Victor's own words sat there in black ink. Route approvals through Kelsey. Jolie can correct downstream if needed. Such elegant leadership. Break it first. Make the woman fix it later. The CEO closed the folder. Victor, effective immediately, you are suspended pending final review. 3 days later, his badge stopped working. No farewell cake. No inspirational LinkedIn tribute. Just a short internal notice about a leadership transition in operations. I read it twice, not because I felt sorry for him, because after 7 years of swallowing insults, I wanted to enjoy a sentence where he finally became the transition he had tried so hard to force onto me instead. 3 weeks after Victor disappeared, the CEO called me into the same conference room, where I had been told I was not ready. This time, there were no vague compliments, no development plans, and no smiling fraud in a Navy suit. There was an offer. Vice President of Operational Systems and Client Strategy. I read the title twice before signing. Not because I doubted myself, but because I wanted to enjoy seeing my name attached to authority, instead of invisible labor. My first decision was simple. No more ghost work. Every critical responsibility had to be documented, assigned, and compensated. Promotions required performance evidence, not hallway charm. No one could approve high-risk system changes without completing training and validation, and PulseGrid's architecture was officially credited to me. Kelsey moved into an analyst role, where she could learn instead of perform leadership for applause. To her credit, she apologized. I told her, never accept a chair just because someone powerful pulls it out. Check whether it is sitting over a trapdoor. Everlane renewed for 3 years, $96 million total. The warehouses stabilized, reports matched reality again. Northbridge called it a recovery. I called it accountability. As for Victor, he vanished quietly, except for one LinkedIn post about pursuing new strategic opportunities. I laughed, closed my laptop, and walked into my next meeting.